Okay, so hello everybody. I'm so excited to be here with you, my colleagues and young fellows. We have Ian from Sweden, André from Portugal, and Julia from Poland. So let's start with a question group. As part of the Gen Z generation, we grew up panicked about climate change, but didn't really hear much about nuclear energy. So how did you all find yourselves advocating for this technology? Let's start with Andre. You have a background in engineering physics. Was it? How did you get into it? Was it through school?
Yeah, so let's start a bit in the beginning. So I was always interested in science, and along my interesting curiosity as a kid, I ran into nuclear fusion, and I want to work in nuclear fusion. I think it's awesome. It can generate electricity. Eventually, I found out that it can't yet. So I understood that although nuclear fusion is the holy grail in a way,
Mhm.
I came to the realization that nuclear fission is the option that works and that's available right now. And many of the fears that I had and that were input on me by the culture and people around me, I have come to understand that a lot of them were myths and just misconceptions, and the others are just not that worrisome and can be controlled as in nuclear energy as we do.
Yeah. Julia, you have a background in biology. How did this happen? How did you? I'm curious to hear you about how these two topics, energy and environment, how can you link them together?
Okay, so it all started when I was quite young because my both parents are biologists. So I grew up in this, in the forest a little bit because they were working, they were collecting data. And I was always worried about the environment because I could see how it's changing during the years of my life, the first years of my life, and it was very difficult for me to see, and I was very anxious. I found out about climate change because when we grew up and we were in primary school, it wasn't that loud topic.
Yeah.
So there was something about climate change in our books, and we read about that, but just a little bit. And I started gathering the information on my own. And I found out that, I want to be a biologist in the future. I want to see polar bears. I want to go to tropical areas. I was a kid, so that were my main interests. And maybe in the future I won't be able to do that. And we need to do something. We need to work together to change something. But I was very young, so it was difficult for me to find a way to start working in that field. And I started gathering information, and I found out about renewable energy sources. I found out about the fact that we need to decarbonize our energy system, and it was a little bit weird for me because renewable energy sources, which were supposed to help the climate, help the environment, and help the biodiversity, they were actually somehow harmful to the biodiversity. So I started looking for different ways, and that's how I found out about nuclear power and how it can help the environment, because of the fact that it takes so small space. It's perfect for the biodiversity, because the best thing that we can do for biodiversity is leave it alone, So if we won't need this huge amount of area of our planet to build renewable energy sources, then we can leave it to the nature. So that's how I found out about that, and then I started, digging deeper and deeper, and right now I have plenty of good reasons to support nuclear energy.
Yeah, right. Totally get you. Totally get you. I would also do the same because nuclear energy has a lot of reasons to support it. I think. Going to you, you have been supporting. You have been an advocate of as a climate activist for quite a while now. Back in 2019, you participated in Fridays for Future strikes, and you skipped school to bring awareness. What motivated you to do it?
I think a lot of my motivation is the same as the motivations we've heard here earlier. It's a lot about the existential crisis that the climate crisis really is, and it's a lot about trying to feel like you have an impact on the world and that what you're doing matters, and just that like trying to get away from this hopelessness, which I think really pervades a lot of Gen Z culture. And I think it's really important to try to keep that optimism, and I think the best way to do that is by really engaging and getting active in social movements or in political causes or in whatever you want really, but just engaging with society I think is absolutely vital for that. And that's what got me engaged in climate in the first place. I felt like here was a place where action needed to happen and I had a way to make change.
Did you have any support by your teachers?
I had some support by my teachers, a few of them less so, but it varied, I would say. But my science teachers were very supportive.
Yeah, so you were never afraid your school progress could get damaged? Or...
I mean, I think to some extent it did, because like you are not in school for a fair bit, but at the same time I was always very good in school before, and my teachers were like, okay, you're just do your homework. Like, I think they had bigger things to care about. Like, I did still have some of the best attendance in my class. So, like, the general class level we were starting at was very low. So I don't think I was their biggest concern.
Yeah, I think the Swedish education system is very comprehensive and very involved to a level they can comprehend your point, and you are able to get involved in those activities. So that the Fridays for Future strikes, it evolved to something bigger. How did it go to your Dear Greenpeace campaign? How did it involve to the campaign?
So first of all, for those who don't know, the Dear Greenpeace campaign is a campaign that I've started together with a few other youths around Europe, which is a response to Greenpeace suing the European Union for the inclusion of nuclear power in the taxonomy, which is what governs green financing in the EU. And the reason I did that was largely because, well, we need nuclear in the EU, and to get nuclear in the EU, we need nuclear financing in the EU. So that's why I got active in that. But like the steps before that made me go really pro-nuclear. I think a lot of that was feeling very disappointed with the solutions that were presented in Fridays for Future, right, especially by older members. There was a lot of this like return to nature talk and a lot of, let's say, deindustrialization. There was very much a romanticism of pre-industrial societies, which I had a very hard time accepting, partially because I was born extremely premature, so I would not have survived my birth in a pre-industrial society, and partially because I grew up in Kenya for a few years, and that really gave me an insight into energy poverty and just like the situation that it is to live without a stable energy grid, and how much of an impact that has on people's quality of life. So I think that is largely what made me opposed to the solutions in Fridays for Future, which is what made me search for more ones, and that is when I found nuclear power.
Yeah. You have said, and I quote, in an interview about your Dear Greenpeace campaign, you said, "Greenpeace is stuck in the past." How do you feel about it, and what do you think is the mentality of the people behind Greenpeace?
So I think what's important to note is that there needs to be a separation between the leadership of Greenpeace, which is very much stuck in the past, because they have been unwilling to listen to the science that has very clearly been put in their faces multiple times by multiple people, and the everyday members of Greenpeace, which I think are honestly just concerned that they want to save the polar bears, they want to save the whales, and all that is very understandable. They have just been handed a way to do that maybe isn't the most sustainable in the long term when it comes to all the facts they're fighting. I think it's very worth to say that Greenpeace has done amazing work in some environmental topics, and we shouldn't discredit all of what they're doing just because they are wrong on a few topics. But they do need to reconsider nuclear power. I think the time has really come to that. And that is because the circumstances around nuclear power have changed so much since they first made that decision that we simply can't keep being anti-nuclear as environmentalists in a world in which the climate crisis is such a large challenge.
Yeah. Yulia, you were too part of this campaign, right?
Yes, exactly.
However, Poland doesn't have nuclear, in contrast with Sweden. How did your campaign go? Also,
in Poland, we didn't have a tough task because we have almost 90% of citizens for nuclear in Poland.
Yeah.
Around 7.2 is against. So it wasn't difficult, and Polish Greenpeace actually do not take strong statements on this topic right now. Back in the days, they used to. They blocked. They were part of the blocking the Żarnowiec nuclear power plant building because we don't have one,
Right.
but we should have one. If not the protests back in the days. So because they blocked the building of a nuclear power plant in Żarnowiec, right now we have few more coal power plants in Poland, and we have very dirty energy system. So that is very important to me because right now we will build nuclear power plant in Poland, and that's very important to me. So it's not blocked one more time, you know, because we can see that the citizens are for. We can see that only small part of them are against, but those people against usually scream the loudest. So we don't want to make it happen, to let it happen, that the nuclear power plant in Poland, like the whole building process is blocked, even though right now those movements are trying to do that. They are trying to spread the information that all the locals in the site of future nuclear power plant are against the whole process, which is not true. And they are trying to discredit the whole investment. So that's why I joined the Greenpeace campaign and stand by IA.
right. You have said once in an interview, they want to stop my homeland, Poland, to stop switching from coal to nuclear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And why is it important for you to be part of this campaign?
Very important during this whole transition process is that it's stable, you know?
Right.
Because right now we know that we need to transit from coal to net zero energy sources, and we want it to be very stable. We want it to be as fast as possible, but not too fast, because if it will be too fast, we will have blackouts, we will suffer from energy poverty, and that will be very difficult for people in Poland. Some of the people who are against the nuclear power in general, they have statements like, we have enough land to build only renewables and live only from energy made by renewable energy sources. But which is truth, you know, when you look at the numbers, it is truth, but we will have to destroy a lot of the surface of our country. Right now, it's almost, we would need half of the area that is right now urbanized for the renewable energy sources to produce the amount of electricity that we need to have. So we would build it in national parks, in the places where the nature is very, very beautiful, because in Poland I can say that this nature is worth protecting. So that's very important to me. And on the other hand, you know, I'm a young adult, so I want to have job in the future. I want to live somewhere. I want to have electricity to, I don't know, turn the light on. in the evening, especially that in Poland we have quite long evenings in the autumn. So so I want to feel this stability and not like playing push and pull with people who are against nuclear power in general.
Yeah, and nowadays I feel that also air pollution is also a hot topic in Poland because the carbon emissions are too high. They should be lower, but that's mainly because they're still operating with the coal plants.
Yes, we have one of the worst air quality in Europe, and we are somewhere a little bit behind India in that case,
Right.
during winter especially, because we still use like natural gas stoves, but that's also connected with the fact that it's easier for people to use that instead of electric stoves. We still heat our homes with coal or with natural gas, so that's a huge issue, and that's the biggest problem in the areas where coal power plants or gas power plants are. So if we would have, or when we will have, nuclear power, it won't be a problem.
Yeah. André, as a Portuguese who doesn't have any nuclear, in Portugal you still managed to be part of the global nuclear net zero group at COP28 in Dubai. What do you see as a Portugal's role in this nuclear perspective? How does it fit in?
Yeah, so I'll start off with saying that although Portugal doesn't have any nuclear, we do import a lot of electricity. Like 20% of our electricity comes from Spain or France, and from that up to 5% in total of 5 to 7%, depending on the year, of our total electricity consumption comes from nuclear energy. And as we know, Spain has a nuclear phase-out plan going around. So if they decide to turn it off, we will also suffer the consequences from Spain's decision. So that is one of the main reasons why Portugal should also bring the question up and warn Spain to at least keep them up until there's any other option. And even though some may be aging, there have been a lot of long-term extensions, long-term operations on nuclear power plants, up to 60, 80 years. And so even if Spaniards think that their plants are aging, you should look around the globe and see that it can be extended and it can keep on providing free of carbon electricity to the whole country. Yeah, that is one of the main points.
Do you see Portugal having any nuclear in the future, long-term, mid-term?
Yeah, so I'll start with a bit of history, which is we have had up to 3 plans to build nuclear power plants. And we are a small country, so we don't need a lot of nuclear power plants. So 1 or 2 would be enough in a way. But all of those plans have been stopped either by inaction from the government, because we don't have a prohibition, but we need an authorization. So if we ask for the authorization and we don't get it by the government, we cannot go ahead and build our nuclear power plant. It has been done in 2006, for example, with Pedro Sampaio Nunes, which we go along very well. And he has told me that in the stage where he needed the approval, it's where it stopped.
Yeah, what they think it still has to be done in Portugal so that maybe the nuclear perspective could be well accepted.
I think a great example could be looking around the globe and keeping a global perspective. You can see countries like Poland getting a new nuclear fleet, power plant fleet. You can look at countries like France, which have 70% of their electricity coming from nuclear energy. And you can then compare it to some things like Germany, where you have up to 7 times more emissions in a lot of days. And for those who don't know, Germany has all renewables kind of way, and they did a nuclear phase out. So they are mostly all renewables, which is the strategy of the Portuguese government too, in a way. And then we have France, and with a lot of nuclear. And so France has 7 times less emissions than Germany. And that is something that has to be noted and has to be proven that it is an effective way to reduce emissions on the long term.
Yeah.
If I may add something, I think we should remember about the fact that, the emissions, they do not know the borders. And some people, because as Photo for Climate, we were, and not only Photo for Climate, like Stand Up for Nuclear also did that. We used to protest in Germany against closing nuclear power plants a few years ago. And I think that's very important, because some people are asking, it's not your country. Why are you protesting there?
Sorry.
We are all people living on the same planet,
Right.
And I think we need to remember about that it's not only about our country. Our country is, of course, very important to us because it's our homeland, and we care about this area, this land. But we should also think about the global perspective, as you said. So I think it's very important to push our politicians a little bit more. Of course, softly if it's needed, a little bit harder if it's needed. But I think it's very important to talk with them, to spread the information and try to support each other, especially that we are from different countries here, on the way to opening new nuclear power plants. So I think that's very important, and we should remember about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to start by fighting against our own politics that are occurring in our national panorama. But at the end, it's all about saving the planet.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So
And
we can make another decisions on the way.
And I think especially as EU residents, which we all are, it's very important to keep in mind that we do have one European energy grid. We are very much interconnected. The emissions of the European energy grid will very much impact all of us. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that as EU citizens, we do have an impact on the politics of the other countries, because we are in a union, and that union is trying to do stuff. And I think it's also important to note that if we campaign at an EU-wide level and our national levels, we can impact the policies in other countries than our own, because we are in a global interconnected world. And I think that's really important to keep in mind, that you can't, just because you're not from a country doesn't mean that you can't have an impact or a stake or a say in what's going on there.
Yeah, through your advocacy, what has worked best in getting your voice heard and changing people's mind?
So, I think those two are very different things. Getting your voice heard and changing people's mind are not the same thing, and they have very little to do with each other. The best way to get your voice heard is to say, fuck fossil fuels and I hate Greenpeace on TV. That gets lots of media attention, media loves it. It's not very effective at changing anyone's mind. Okay? This is important to keep in mind here. It's very easy to get media attention if you just go controversial enough. It's not going to change anyone's mind, though. To change people's minds, I think what's most important is to have really heart-to-heart and one-to-one conversations. I think that a lot of the role that we have when talking to media and when having these large-scale demonstrations is not to directly change people's minds. It's to give them that tiny spark, that tiny seed that will lead to them thinking, maybe I need to rethink my opinion on nuclear power. They'll go home, they won't do anything about it for multiple weeks. Maybe they'll see a documentary a few weeks later which says something like, oh, nuclear power is useful in France. And they'll be like, oh, I heard something about that a few weeks ago. And that's what we're doing. We're constantly trying to put these seeds down of maybe there's another way. Because I think a lot of what people have heard about nuclear power in school and through media and all of that is very much focused on the negatives. And what we're trying to do is really put in that spark that maybe it isn't all bad. Maybe we do need it. And I think that spark is what really makes a difference. It's that when people keep hearing that maybe nuclear power isn't all that bad, I do think they do eventually reconsider. I think that's what's most important. Even if you can't change their mind as you're standing on the street talking to them, the fact that you have shown them a different opinion on nuclear power, I think is really important.
Yeah. In all this excitement for nuclear in a global level, what is still missing in this conversation?
I think the global excitement for nuclear power has been really good. I think it has taken us a long way forward. But I think it's important to note that there are good and bad reasons to be excited about nuclear power. I think we need to be, to some extent, careful. Because there are proponents of nuclear power which are climate deniers, for example, and similar things. And we need to be very careful with that, because what we're saying is that we believe that nuclear power can solve the climate crisis for the good of humanity. That's what we're saying here, and I think we really need to keep that in mind. Because if we don't keep that in mind, the deployment of nuclear power, like the deployment of any other technology source, can be done for bad. Like, all technology can be used to do shitty things. And we need to keep in mind the motivation and the morals behind why we are for nuclear power in all the campaigns we do. It's very easy to get lost in this optimistic feeling of, oh, I like this technology, and you research it and you become very, very scientific and very technological, and you start using acronyms and you start tossing out complicated scientific terminology, and that can be really interesting and really good, but it's not going to change anyone's mind. You need to really keep in mind that, like, we are not fighting about the fact that pressurized water reactors are better than non-pressurized water reactors. Like, we can't go around doing that, or we're not going to be talking about the details of SMR technology. What we're saying is that, hey, everybody has the right to a washing machine. That's fundamentally what we're saying here. We're saying that everybody has the right to the energy needed to run a washing machine, have light on in their homes, cook on electricity, heat or cool their homes as needed. We're saying that all of these fundamental human rights, the right to cook, the right to eat, the right to have flowing water, the right to have a functioning healthcare system, that is what we're fighting for through the lens of nuclear power. And I think that that's what we really have to keep in mind, because as this movement grows and as the pro-nuclear field grows, more and more people will enter it. And if we don't keep those fundamental morals in line, if we become some kind of loose wish-wash of people that are all like, oh, nuclear power is kind of nice, then we're going to be no different from the environmental movement as a whole, which is just like, climate is nice, but then there are people on one end which are like, let's starve the people in India to save the planet, and people on the other end that are like, let's not do that. And I do think we really have to keep that in mind, that like, even though this technology is great and that we know a lot about it, we are for it for moral and ideological reasons, not because of the technology. If it comes out in 50, 60 years that the science shows that we were wrong, then we have to be willing to accept that. I think that's what's really important here, that we can't become as dogmatically pro-nuclear as the anti-nuclears are dogmatically anti-nuclear. We have to keep in mind why we're doing this.
Yeah. And we have to keep the conversation simple. Unlike the renewables, it is very easy to explain why the wind is blowing and how to create energy, or not create, but how to power a city. Yeah, how to generate electricity through it. Such as also some example is the sun. This is very example to. It's very easy to explain people how to generate electricity, but nuclear is I would say, a much more advanced technology, much harder to explain, and that's why probably there are some fears that people have.
As the anti-nuclears say, it's a very complicated way to boil water.
Yeah, right. Also, in a more national way, in Poland, how do you get your voice heard, and what do you think is still missing in the conversation?
I think very important way of acting is what Ia previously said. We need to be consistent and calm in the conversation, you know? Also, I think I think to understand the whole picture, we need to understand how our educational system is working. They are telling us something is good, something is bad. Two options. They are telling us something is white or something is black. two options. So, and at school, when you read something in a book, it's truth. And that's the truth given us by gods. I don't know who. But, children are given those information. They are getting these from the teachers. And if you don't agree with the teacher, then you are wrong. Not the teacher, because teacher has a book. And the book is the only correct source of information. So what's important, and I wanted to a little bit follow up what Ia said, is that we should base this whole conversation on science. The science is not something that was given to us. And somebody sent, aliens sent us like some kind of a book, and we read it, and okay, that's the truth. The scientific process is a constant process, and it's constantly changing, and it's about asking questions. It's about having those very long, very difficult conversations is, based on data. So I think it's very important to remember that somebody can have different data than you. And then you need to talk with them and try to find out which way is correct. And I think that's missing in the whole conversation in Poland, but maybe in other countries too. Because I can see on Twitter, or on X right now, so I can see that some conversations right now are very difficult, and people are treating each other as different tribes if they have different statements. So that's what's missing. This whole conversation is very energetic. It's very, emotional. It's something romantic about getting electricity from wind or sun or water, because we can visualize this beautiful landscape with windmills and wind turbines and PV panels. So yes, it's very difficult because people tend to emotionally protect their statements, and I think we should avoid that. We should have very calm conversations, and we should also teach children that it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to have a different statement on something, unless you are or as far as you're willing to talk about that with the person with different statement than yours. Yes, so that's what's missing, and how we can get our voices heard. In Poland, we're trying to have different campaigns online usually, but also on site, and we are trying to talk with the politicians, because they are making the decisions. Yes, so that's very, very important, and that's also something that is possible in other countries. So I highly encourage everyone that's watching us to start talking with the politicians, because you chose them. So right now they should listen to you. Yes, and to the science and to many other people who chose them. So based on that, they should make their decisions. Yes, and I think that's the most efficient way of getting your voice heard.
Yeah. Where does
I have a note to add. So you talked a bit about the educational system, and there's this thing which is very much generational, which is we get our news from Twitter, from Instagram, from other places like this, which have not as much filter as it did before. And so nowadays it is much easier to spread disinformation. And so one of the things that could be taught in schools, in a way, it's learning to live with the fact that you may be wrong sometimes. You heard something somewhere, but that information may be wrong.
Yeah.
And people don't like this feeling. Nobody likes to be wrong, I guess. And as of that, we need to come together and talk about being wrong. It's okay to be wrong as long as we keep on learning and keep on searching for more information to know better.
And to have curiosity, because that's the thing that our whole, world was built on, curiosity. And right now I feel like curiosity especially at school, you are taught that it's not that good to be curious. In Poland, I don't know if that there's a saying in English, but in Poland there's a saying that the curiosity is first step to hell.
We got a similar
So-
one in Portuguese.
Okay, so maybe it's an
So,
international thing.
I think this is a very funny cultural difference. Because with the Swedish education system, the most vital thing they teach you, and they'll repeat this in every subject, in every year you go, is source criticism. If you can't do source criticism for every single subject you attend at school, you will not be able to pass year 3. Like, as a 10-year-old, you will fail school if you can't do source criticism.
But that's amazing.
This is
Yeah.
it's really
Yeah,
much
yeah.
it's really the most vital thing they teach you, and everyone hates it because you have to do it again and again and again and again. And everyone's like, but I did that in Swedish last week and I have to do it in English. And everyone's really pissed about it, but it's something that I have come to really appreciate after graduating, even if I was also complaining while I was doing it in school. But I think that's really important to know that, like, there are systems where this is a thing, and that is, I think, really, now that I've left, one of the most vital things you can learn in an education system is to be source critical. It's to know that who is funding the source, what are their motivations, why are they doing this, when are they doing this, how do they know this? All of those questions are things that you have to answer, and this is a skill that you have to practice. It's not something that, like, I know that, like, as far as I've understood it in, like, the American school system, they'll go like, oh yeah, here's a list of things to look for in a good source, and, like, that doesn't help. This is a skill you need to practice, and you need to be practicing it in your everyday life. You need to be able to go that, oh, this newspaper is slightly right-wing leaning, so when they are saying that XYZ is happening, maybe they have a reason to be saying that. Like, all of that is something that you learn to do in your everyday life, and that is something that I have become really grateful for having that skill, that I can look at a newspaper article and go, who's paying for this? Come on! And I do think that that's really vital, and I would like to say to you guys that there are better systems around, even if, of course, the Swedish education system, like all others, have their own problems. But that I think a vital focus on source criticism is a really good start for turning out an educated populace that can actually learn for themselves, especially in this very digital and, as you've said, very, let's say, alternative facts world of ours.
I got this saying. Isn't with Portugal have that saying, curiosity killed the cat? Right?
Yeah. So maybe a context. It's like, imagine a cat going to a pan, taking a look at the water, and it was taking a look and it fell. That's about it.
Yeah, basically, if you are too curious, you might put your life at risk. So you just stay there in your place and just.
But I think what's important is that generations before us, before Gen Z, they were raised on those kind of sayings, and they were raised in this, school where they give you information. If they were from Sweden, then maybe not, but from some other in some other countries, they were raised in that reality. And right now we are trying to talk with them, because right now they are dissidents, they are politicians, and they are making the decisions. Yes, so we need to remember that they are a little bit differently raised, and if we want to get to them, we need to think a little bit differently, or maybe sometimes we need to try to understand them and try to be calm, try to be diplomatic. And it's most of the advocates and activists, they know that it's constant going to the politician, knocking on the door, nobody's there, nobody's answering. Come tomorrow. Coming tomorrow, knocking on the door. They are there, but they don't want to answer, so you need to go home, then knock on the door one more time. So we need to constantly try. And I think that's the most important part, to get your voice through this wall.
Yeah. In Portugal, what next steps do you want to see happen in the future so that nuclear can rise someday?
Yeah. So first of all, we need to get real about electricity and understand that if we keep on using a lot of intermittent renewables, such as wind and solar, we'll need some way to store electricity, store energy to get electricity. For that, as of right now, we have hydro, and that's our biggest source of storage in Portugal. But in Portugal, as climate changes all around us, we are ever more getting more and more droughts, and more frequently and more severe. And so that water that is stored in dams is fundamental for life as we know it. We need to drink water, we need to feed our agriculture, to get our animals some water. And so all of that is based on a vital source that is water, and we must protect it in a world that is changing towards more and more droughts. Now, we could say that, oh, you just build a battery, but you need to be very careful with that, mainly because of costs. Because if you take, there are some days where there's no wind and there's no sun in the night, right? And so you need the storage for one day. Take that example. For one day. And if you need that, you would need something like 20% of Portuguese PIB to get the electricity only for one day. Else you will have blackouts or use gas. And we all know that gas is not the optimal in terms of carbon emissions. So we need an alternative, and that sounds like nuclear is one very good source of stable energy that can keep us throughout the windless and sunless days.
Right. Even though this is a youth panel, we at least all of you three, have quite a experience participating in big events related to energy and climate. Here at COP27, you were present there in Egypt. You found some drafts of the final declaration, and with the help of other allies, you were able to change the writing to be inclusive of nuclear. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so what happened was that I was really bored at an airport and pissed at the UN for having very complicated documents. So I was trying to find this draft, because all the newspapers were talking about the second draft of the implementation plan, which is this big plan about what they're actually going to do about the things they discussed at COP. It has been released, and it says this thing and this thing and this thing. I was like, okay, where the hell is this document? So I was searching through all these UN databases, and they're a mess. It took me 2 hours the first time around, and then when I was trying to find it for COP28, it took another hour because they'd moved it. So yeah, lovely massive database that. But I did eventually find it, and then I was like, okay. I read through it, and I read the energy part, and I was like, okay, well, that says renewable. We can't have that. This is the plan that affects where the funds in the loss and damage fund can go. This would be a disaster for the coming transition. So I wrote in this group chat that I was in with all the pro-nuclear advocates that had been at COP, and I said hey, the document says this, can we do anything? And then I got on my flight. So I had no idea what was happening. I landed in London for my transit, and in London there were newspaper headlines everywhere which said COP negotiations delayed by 3 hours. But because Britain isn't in the EU anymore, I don't have any internet in the UK. So I had no idea what was happening. I got on my flight to Sweden. I landed in Sweden, and my inbox had blown up. Everyone was like, they've changed it. And I was like, great, because I'd just been on a plane for so many hours and I was just dead. And that was a really, I think that really shows that even if you're a tiny part of a movement, doing just a tiny action can trigger the movement you are in to achieve great things. So just be aware that alone, no, you can't change the world, but with the support of a movement behind you and the right actions at the right time, you absolutely can.
Yeah, but I'm curious, how long did it took? How did it enroll?
I think so as far as I've understood it from Seth Gray, I sent the message. Someone managed to reach out to the White House staff the White House staff managed to reach out to the staff at COP, and then they started like renegotiating this because they were like, we can't have this. And apparently, in this entire chain of communications, nobody had thought about the fact that the word renewable excluded nuclear energy. They were all like, oh, what? That's a problem. I was like, thanks, I guess. So, but they did manage to change it in the end, so that's very good. But I do think it's important to note, like, a lot of the times it's very easy to think that, like, oh, that was like intentionally malicious, that was intentionally anti-nuclear. A lot of the time, nuclear is just being forgotten. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that, like, yes, the work we're doing is hard, but I think a lot of the work we're doing that has to be done is just putting nuclear on the agenda. It's just saying, hey, what about nuclear? I think that alone can do a lot. It doesn't need to be this constant fight again, giants like Greenpeace. Sometimes it's just a politician in the US that forgot that nuclear power existed for 5 minutes while writing a document.
Yeah. Last year in Dubai, you folks were all present there, right? And actually, Julia has a pretty nice story to tell us about. Nuclear was announced to triple the nuclear in Dubai, and the Polish president thanked you personally during the press conference, and later in the week you were also part of the final negotiations in COP, right?
Yes, and that was quite an interesting story, because up till the day of the event, I didn't know that I will be mentioned, and before the ceremony started, our president asked to meet with me, and he told me that he has a surprise for me, and crazy. I still don't believe that it happened, because it's truly crazy situation, but I'm very, very grateful, because it means that our actions are seen. It's not only my case. They see it everywhere, and the politicians, but also the citizens, they right now they hear about nuclear, and that's what Ia said. It's important to put nuclear on the agenda. So we are changing something, and the fact that we can participate in events like COP, that's also something great. That we can get blue zone passes, mind blowing. And we are only youth, or not only, but we are youth, and we can participate in this whole process of like constructing new laws, and this politics. That's something amazing. That's something amazing that we can meet with our country president, or we can change the draft at COP, and. Yeah, and in moments like this, it's very visible that our work is important, and people, they want to hear it. They want to read about situations like that. They want to share that there is person XYZ who's working for nuclear in our country, and we have those kind of people. We have people who sacrifice their private life sometimes, and they go to Dubai, to Egypt. They sometimes stay at home and read drafts and try to adjust them, try to contact as many people as possible to change something. Right. So I think that's very important, and that was amazing situation, because I felt appreciated, that this whole work is not only seen as a result, but also somebody can see that the result has somebody behind it. So that's I'm very grateful for that, because it was like a power giving situation.
Yeah,
I think it's absolutely vital to know that the politicians are reading the news too. If you get in there, they will have heard your name, most likely, especially if they're working in your field. Maybe not immediately the president, but the secretaries of energy, the department heads. If you are active in their field and you start becoming known, they will have heard of you. And then you can say, hey, I was in this newspaper article a while ago. Could we talk some more about it? It's good to have that in, because obviously the politicians, they have a lack of time, and they have security concerns and all of these things. But getting that first piece of media is not necessarily that difficult. Just spam the media outlets, especially during summer. Media outlets have nothing to do in the summer. If you want a life tip on how to get into media, just spam them during summer. They have nothing to do. They're really bored. They're desperate for news. They'll post anything. That's why you get all these stupid articles. Like, I think we had one a while ago, which was like, the price of ham is 30% different between these two brands of supermarkets. It was like, how do you have nothing better to report on? And that's summer media for you. So if you want an easy way into media, do it during the summer. They're bored as hell.
And if you can, try to reach to the politicians directly sometimes. Yeah. And the whole story with this shout out was started by us, me and my friends who are also working in the climate field. We made a report for Polish negotiators, and we sent it to them. They read it. They were grateful that they can read the youth perspective. Also, we were grateful that they wanted to read the youth perspective. So that was a win-win situation. And afterwards, we reached to the president palace, and we asked if before COP he wants to have a meeting with youth, and we had this meeting with him. It was also very interesting because he met with us. There were like 7 people around the table and president, and we had this inside conversation what we as youth think is vital during this COP. Yes, so that's also a way to get to the politicians, directly. It's you can just call the bureau or any place where they work, and usually they are willing to meet with you because it's quite,
It looks good in the media.
It looks good in the media. But also some of them, they want to hear the youth perspective, but it looks good in the media.
And not only that, but those politicians, even though they are famous and they appear in the news all the time, they were also once young voices like us.
Yes, exactly.
Trying to make a difference somewhere.
And I think it's important to say that, like, even if you don't feel like you have the skills or the knowledge or the outreach to reach up to those national level politicians, it is very relevant to also reach out to the local ones to say, hey, would the mayor in my city support a potential nuclear development here? That is a great thing you can do, because if multiple mayors around your country is going, we want a nuclear plant, then your government is probably going to go, maybe we should build a nuclear plant. And like it can be at that level, and like especially if you live in a city that is a bit on the smaller side, these can be very, very relevant and impactful conversations to have that can be quite easy to have. So even if you don't feel like you really you could be in a room with 7 people and the president of your country, feel free to reach out to your mayor or your regional head or just some secretary in the energy department. They do a lot of work they could really benefit from, even if that just means that you get a little paragraph in their next report which says, this is the opinions of the youth on nuclear. That's a great thing. So don't feel like you have to reach for these very high heights just because Julia and I got drunk with the Belgian Prime Minister once. You can start lower than that. You can start with your local mayor. You can start with whoever you can reach out to, because even just like getting into the head of your local energy company can be a great thing to really make sure that nuclear power is accepted.
You, André, as a fellow co-founder of Nuclear Vision in Portugal, you established your first pro-nuclear organization. How did that go? How did it all start?
Yeah, so first of all, somebody had to set in motion something inside of me. And so that started partially with Mark Nelson. And he said, he left the seed, and he told me more about nuclear. I was intrigued. He had some answers that I was not expecting. He had some questions I thought I knew the answer for, but I was totally wrong. And with that, I understood that we really need to get some things clear, because there has been a huge disinformation or misinformation campaign around nuclear. And somebody needs to do a pro-nuclear campaign too. Like, if they can make their disinformation and misinformation campaign, so can we make a campaign pro-nuclear. Like, if they can say random things and think that it's okay to say that fish has three eyes because of nuclear, we can also go around and say, well, let me tell you all the 3 ways why nuclear is good. And if we do that multiple times, it can be powerful and it can change stuff, as we have proven with my colleagues over here. And sometimes it's just a little post, a little knock on the door, a little drinking with a Belgian prime minister. If you just go along and get somewhere and get something done, in the end, you will get the world to a better place. With these small things, you set in motion something that can eventually change the world. And that's why I co-founded this together with you, Diana and Rodrigo. And we all have taken this as our main focus, to get a campaign pro-nuclear, to tell people about nuclear, because we don't talk about it enough. As a solution, so good as it is, we don't talk about it enough. And that's what we set up to do, and that's what we've been doing for a year, over a year.
Right. Had you ever thought about, for a minute, about nuclear energy before your meeting with Mark Nelson?
Okay, so let me tell you the Portuguese experience of nuclear energy. There's a nuclear power plant in Spain, in our main river. The nuclear power plant is Almaraz, and it's the first one that is set up to close in the nuclear phase-outs. And the saying goes like, oh, if it blows up, it will hit us. Or things like, oh, it pollutes the waters. And when you get real down to these questions, you see that, number one, why would it explode? It's designed in like systems and systems of safety. And number two, the pollution in the river is just hot water. It just gets a bit hotter than it was on the inside. Right. And so that's about what I had heard about nuclear energy until I was like 18, 19. Yeah. And then I heard some things of nuclear fusion, but that's only for people which are really interested in this topic. And we should get it out.
Nuclear fusion is for rich people with too much money that don't care about now, but only about the future.
Yeah, and a few months later, you found the group Nuclear Vision, and you launched this conference along with you brought some speakers.
There's a pro-nuclear group going around in Portugal, but they never met, kinda, and so sometimes you just gotta bring them all together, get them talking, get a bunch of people in the room, and we have the luck to be in the university where we study nuclear physics, where we can study nuclear physics, and so we are at the right place to do something amazing. And if you just bring people together, stuff happens. Like, the world gets going around when two people talk and get somewhere together. And if we are willing to bring all the knowledgeable people, all the finance people, all the politicians together in the same room, maybe we can change the things again. Yeah.
Human ingenuity and solidarity are the only things that really change the world.
Are we expecting more of this to come? More events? Tell us about it.
Of course we are.
I've heard tomorrow there is something.
Oh, is there? Yeah, so we're making this thing in the place not very well known in Lisbon, which is called Rocio Plaza, and it's just one of the main plazas. And we're doing this Stand Up for Nuclear event. where we're bringing specialists from all over the world in the pro-nuclear advocacy world and getting them all together in Lisbon, talking to media, talking to politicians, inviting everyone to see that it is possible to be pro-nuclear with a lot of reasons behind them. And get the word out that nuclear is a technology that has been around for over 50 years and it's here to stay. And it is a viable way to get decarbonization done right.
We have had conferences, so many events. So what's the next step? And I'm speaking to all of you.
Very difficult question. What's the next step? I think for me, next step is... Okay, so I have few next steps. And I can tell you about few of them. So I finished my bachelor's degree in biology and I started my degree in law. I started law studies at the university, and I want to, in the future, after I get the proper education, I would like to start working on, European Union law, national law, and international law. And I think that's something very important when we talk about climate change, because we still need those specialists who also know how to create law if we want the law to be, sustainable in general. Because we forget that usually policymakers and lawyers, they are lawyers, so they know how the system works, but usually they do not have the background as a specialist in different fields. So I think that's quite important. And next week there is a New Year Climate Week, and I'm also attending this event. So hopefully their nuclear also will have its advocates.
You studied in Krakow, right?
Yes.
I was
yes.
actually there last year, and it's a very beautiful city.
I'm so grateful you liked it, and I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As a very young person, why do we need youth voices speaking about nuclear, and how can we encourage more of them to speak?
I think what is important about, let's say, the really young voices in nuclear, that is to say, me, being under 20. But I think what's important with the youth voices is that we promote them, that we make sure that they can have their voices heard, and also that we have to be accepting of the fact that it takes time to learn to speak. It takes time to get good at speaking. It takes time to get good at handling media. Those are not things your average 15-year-old will possess. And that is something that I think we should really be looking for. As we expand the pro-nuclear movement, we need to be looking for a comprehensive way to school the youth that are coming into our movement, because we have a very large potential, and I think we have a very large potential at grabbing and to some extent saving the youth that have felt very depressed and very disappointed by the lack of action in the traditional climate movement. They are moving towards us right now. And if we manage to educate them properly, both on the facts, both on source criticism and rhetoric and all of these skills, I think that we can see this become a global and extremely powerful movement for change. And I think that we can become an extremely powerful movement for optimism and for hope. And that's really what I want to see us become. We need to be a very hopeful and optimistic movement. And to achieve that, my next steps in the long term will be launching We Planet Youth. I know. Which aims to do that. It aims to educate and inspire young people into comprehensive climate action with technology optimism at the forefront. So I think that's really important. In the short term, I will also be attending New York Climate Week. And of course, the demonstration tomorrow.
That's also a very important part of my next steps.
Yeah.
So we will also need a founder of we Planet Youth Portugal.
Yes.
And, I wish you the best luck in the future events.
It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Also, the best of luck in your future actions.
Right.